Steph Curry is renowned for his humility and calm demeanor, but one encounter at an airport would challenge him in ways he hadn't anticipated. It was one of those days when Steph, fresh off a media tour, was eager to return home. Despite being a global basketball icon, he preferred to keep his travels low-key. No entourage, no special privileges, just Steph with his carry-on bag. On this day, he was heading back to San Francisco for a youth charity event, something he was deeply passionate about and rarely missed. At the gate, passengers were beginning to line up for boarding. Steph, dressed casually with his hood up and sunglasses on, quietly joined the first-class line. He hoped to avoid unnecessary attention. Most people around him were absorbed in their phones or chatting softly, creating a calm, ordinary scene. However, one passenger stood out, a woman in the same line, elegantly dressed and carrying an expensive designer bag. Her body language radiated impatience as she glanced repeatedly at her watch, huffing audibly. When the airline attendant called for first-class boarding, Steph stepped forward as instructed. But before he could take another step, the woman cut him off sharply. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This line is for first-class passengers only." Steph froze, momentarily caught off guard. He hadn't even spoken a word, yet her tone and pointed look made her assumption clear. She didn't think someone like him belonged there. Around them, passengers shifted uncomfortably, their attention now drawn to the confrontation. A few whispered among themselves, but no one intervened. For a brief moment, Steph considered letting it slide, allowing the airline attendant to clarify the situation. But then he thought about the countless times his parents had likely faced similar moments of prejudice. His mom had always taught him to stand up for himself with grace and to never lose his composure in the face of ignorance. Before he could respond, the airline attendant, recognizing Steph immediately, smiled warmly. "It's fine, ma'am," she said. "He's in first class." But the woman wasn't satisfied. She crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes at Steph. "Are you sure?" she pressed. "I've seen people try to cut the line before." The tension was palpable now. Passengers whispered louder, some trying to figure out who this man in the hoodie and sunglasses could be. Despite the growing unease, Steph remained composed. He smiled faintly, his calm demeanor disarming. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice steady and kind. "I can wait my turn." His response stunned everyone. The woman, visibly flustered, didn't push further. Steph stepped back slightly, allowing others to board ahead. The moment was a small but profound reminder of his character. He had every right to escalate or assert his place in line, but he chose a path of humility and dignity, showing those around him what grace under pressure truly looked like. For Steph, it wasn't about proving a point. It was about staying true to the values instilled in him. Kindness, humility, and standing tall without losing composure. Moments like these didn't just define his public image. They reflected who he was at his core. Steph stepped aside, letting the woman board ahead of him. He decided it wasn't worth making a scene, especially in an airport where chaos was already a given. Calm and composed, he remained true to his nature, brushing off the moment as another lesson in patience. But this wasn't the end of the story. What unfolded next would surprise everyone. As the boarding process continued, the tension from the earlier encounter lingered in the air. To those who witnessed it, Steph's response might have seemed too gracious. After all, the woman's condescending tone had crossed a line. Yet Steph was never one to overreact or make a spectacle of himself, particularly in public settings. Still, her words gnawed at him, not because of the inconvenience, but because of what they implied about assumptions people make. Steph eventually boarded the plane, stepping into the first-class cabin. As he passed the rows, he spotted the woman from earlier already settled in her seat. She was flipping through a magazine, her demeanor calm, as if the earlier exchange hadn't happened. Steph, ever polite, greeted the flight attendants with a warm smile, tucked his carry-on into the overhead compartment, and slid into a seat directly behind her. He adjusted his noise-canceling headphones, ready to escape into his playlist and tune out the world for the duration of the flight. But fate had other plans. Just before takeoff, the woman flagged down a flight attendant. Her voice, sharp and annoyed, cut through the hum of the cabin. "Excuse me, why is it so warm in here? Can you adjust the air conditioning?" she demanded. The attendant nodded courteously, promising to look into it. Steph glanced up briefly, noticing the subtle unease on the faces of nearby passengers. While it wasn't unusual for someone to make such a request, the entitlement in her tone was hard to miss. Steph sighed inwardly, adjusting his headphones in an attempt to block out the commotion. Yet, snippets of her voice kept breaking through. She complained about the temperature, the seating, even the water not being cold enough. Her litany of grievances created an air of discomfort in the cabin. Midway through the flight, the attendants began serving meals. When one approached Steph, he smiled warmly and thanked them as they handed him his tray. It was a simple gesture, but it didn't go unnoticed. A few rows back, a young boy's eyes widened as he recognized Steph. Excitedly, he nudged his dad. "Dad!" "That's Steph Curry," he whispered, his voice brimming with awe. Steph caught the moment, turned, and gave the boy a small wave. The boy's face lit up with pure joy, his excitement palpable. The interaction drew the attention of other passengers, including the woman seated ahead of Steph. She turned slightly, her eyes narrowing as she observed him. Recognition flickered across her face, and for a moment her expression shifted, first to surprise, then to quiet discomfort. She quickly averted her gaze, refocusing on her meal as if trying to ignore what she'd just realized. Steph, unfazed, simply smiled to himself. Sometimes, life has its own way of teaching lessons. What happened next left the woman and everyone around her speechless. As the flight attendants came back around to clear trays, the young boy and his father approached Steph. The dad, clearly respectful and slightly nervous, hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Curry, I'm sorry to bother you," he began. "My son is a huge fan, and he couldn't stop talking about you. If it's not too much trouble, could we get a quick picture?" Steph removed his headphones, his smile warm and genuine. "Of course," he said. "What's your name, buddy?" The boy, grinning from ear to ear, stammered, "It's Jason." "Well, Jason," Steph said, crouching down slightly to meet him at eye level, "I'm glad to meet you. Let's get that picture." As they posed for the photo, the woman in the row had finally pieced everything together. Her face flushed a deep shade of red, and she quickly averted her gaze, pretending to be engrossed in her magazine. Steph noticed her reaction out of the corner of his eye, but chose to ignore it. He focused on Jason and his dad, ensuring the moment was special for them. The flight attendant, who had been watching the scene unfold, approached with a smile. "Mr. Curry, I hope you're enjoying the flight. Let us know if you need anything." Steph nodded politely. "Thank you. It's been great so far." The woman, however, couldn't take it anymore. Turning slightly, her voice now hesitant, she asked, "Excuse me, are you, someone famous?" Steph glanced at her, his expression calm and measured. "I play basketball," he replied simply. It was an understatement of monumental proportions, but Steph didn't feel the need to elaborate. The woman's face turned an even deeper shade of red as the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just any passenger. This was Steph Curry, one of the most admired athletes in the world. And she had dismissed him as someone who didn't belong in first class. What Steph did next left a lasting impression. He leaned back in his seat, put his headphones on, and resumed listening to his music, acting as though nothing had happened. His grace in handling the situation spoke volumes, far louder than any confrontation ever could. As the plane began its descent, the woman shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She stole glances at Steph, as though debating whether to apologize. But Steph didn't seem to notice, or perhaps he chose not to. When the plane landed, he stood up, helped a fellow passenger with their bag, and waited patiently for his turn to exit, just like everyone else. Before stepping off the plane, Jason and his dad approached Steph one last time. "Thank you, Mr. Curry," the dad said sincerely. "You made our flight unforgettable." Steph smiled warmly. "No problem. Take care, you two." As he walked through the terminal, the woman trailed behind, clearly still shaken by the events. She didn't say a word, but the lesson was written all over her face. She had judged Steph unfairly, but his actions had shown her what true character looked like. Steph moved through the bustling terminal with quiet confidence, blending into the crowd despite being one of the most recognizable athletes in the world. For him, it was just another day, another chance to show that kindness and humility always win. Steph had a connecting flight to catch, and though the encounter with the entitled woman on the plane lingered in his mind, he chose to let it go. As he entered the lounge to wait for his next flight, he spotted Jason and his dad seated nearby. Jason's excitement hadn't faded. He was still clutching his phone and grinning from ear to ear. The sight warmed Steph's heart. It reminded him how much joy something as simple as a photo could bring, and why humility and kindness were so important, even when others might not extend the same courtesy. Finding a quiet corner, Steph settled in, ready to relax before boarding. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through messages when a commotion at the lounge entrance caught his attention. Looking up, he saw the same woman from the plane in a heated argument with another passenger. Voices rose, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. "She shoved right past me without even an apology," an older man exclaimed, his voice laced with frustration. "Well, maybe you shouldn't have been blocking the walkway," the woman retorted, her tone sharp and defensive. The argument escalated quickly, and lounge staff had to step in to de-escalate the situation. After a few tense moments, the conflict subsided, but the awkwardness lingered. The woman, visibly irritated, sat down at a nearby table, glaring at anyone who dared to look her way. Steph observed the scene quietly, his thoughts not on her behavior, but on how often people judged others without knowing their stories. As the lounge atmosphere gradually returned to normal, Steph's attention shifted back to Jason and his dad. The young boy approached a staff member to ask for a snack, his dad following close behind. Steph smiled as he watched the pair interact, their bond reminding him of his own children. Moments like these, simple, filled with innocence and joy, meant more to him than any flashy display of fame or success. An idea came to Steph. He reached into his bag, pulled out his phone, and typed a quick message. A few minutes later, a member of his team arrived at the lounge with a small package. Steph stood, walked over to Jason and his dad, and handed them the bag with a warm smile. "Just a little something to say thanks for making the flight more enjoyable," he said. Jason's eyes widened as he opened the bag and pulled out a pair of Steph's signature Under Armour sneakers, along with a few other signed items. His excitement spilled over as he looked up at Steph, his voice bursting with gratitude. "Thank you so much, Mr. Curry," Jason exclaimed. Jason's dad, equally moved by the gesture, shook Steph's hand. "This means the world to him." "Thank you." Steph exchanged a few more words with them, enjoying the genuine connection. As he returned to his seat, the joy on Jason's face stayed with him. For Steph, it wasn't just about the sneakers. It was about creating a moment of kindness that Jason and his dad would remember forever. The woman from earlier glanced over, clearly interested in the interaction. She hesitated for a moment before standing, and walking toward them. Her expression was different now, softer, less defensive. "Excuse me," she began, her voice quieter than before. "I just wanted to say, I didn't realize who you were earlier. I'm sorry if I came off as rude." Steph looked at her, his expression calm and thoughtful. After a brief pause, he nodded. "It's okay," he said simply, his tone warm yet sincere. The woman lingered for a moment, clearly unsure of what else to say. She glanced at Jason, who was now chatting enthusiastically with his dad, then back at Steph. "That was really kind of you," she said, finally gesturing toward the gift. Steph shrugged lightly. "It's the little things that count," he replied. The simplicity of his words seemed to strike a chord with her. She offered a small smile before returning to her seat. She was noticeably more subdued, maybe for the first time that day. She was seeing Steph not as a celebrity, but as someone who genuinely cared about people soon. The announcement for the next flight echoed through the lounge. Steph waved goodbye to Jason and his dad before grabbing his bag. As he walked toward the gate, he glanced back at the woman one last time. She met his gaze and gave him another small smile, a gesture that carried a hint of acknowledgement and perhaps even gratitude. Steph left the lounge with a light step and a full heart. It wasn't about fame or recognition for him. It was about moments like these, where kindness and grace could make all the difference. Little did he know what happened next would leave an even bigger impression. As Steph Curry boarded his next flight, the events of the day played on his mind, from the entitled woman's actions to Jason's pure excitement. It was a lot of emotions, but for Steph it was all about staying true to himself. Kindness, humility, and gratitude were principles he carried everywhere he went. Little did he know this was the last he'd hear of what had unfolded. Earlier, after landing at his destination, Steph stepped into the terminal, prepared to move on with his day, but as he scrolled through his phone, a notification caught his attention. A social media post had gone viral, a video of his interaction with Jason in the lounge, including some parts of the earlier confrontation. On the plane, a passenger had secretly filmed everything and shared it online, captioning the video, "Steph Curry proves why he's a GOAT on and off the court." The post went viral within hours, amassing thousands of comments from fans and strangers alike. People praised Steph Curry for his calm demeanor, humility, and generous spirit. Among the shared videos was one that captured the moment the woman from the plane apologized, showcasing her change in attitude. The story spread like wildfire, making headlines and trending across social media platforms. Steph scrolled through the comments later that evening, smiling to himself. He was never one to seek attention for his actions, but seeing how his response inspired others made the moment even more meaningful. One comment in particular caught his eye. If more people acted like Steph, the world would be a better place. Kindness changes everything. It was a simple reminder of why he always chose to lead by example. Meanwhile, the woman from the plane stumbled upon the video as it circulated online. Watching herself through someone else's eyes was an eye-opening experience. She saw how her behavior came across, entitled, dismissive, and judgmental. But she also saw how Steph had handled the situation with grace and humility, turning what could have been a confrontation into a lesson in character. For the first time in a long while, she felt compelled to reflect on her actions. Inspired by Steph's example, she decided it was time to make a change. She started by making an anonymous donation to a children's charity in Steph's honor, hoping to spread a little kindness of her own. Back at home, Steph sat down to dinner with Aisha, his wife, and their kids. As they shared a meal, he recounted the events of the day, from the encounter with Jason and his dad to the viral post. Aisha listened intently, her eyes lighting up with pride. "That's why you're so special," she said, smiling at him. "It's not just about what you do on the court. It's about how you treat people off it." Their kids chimed in, eager to hear more, and Steph used the opportunity to teach them about the power of kindness. "Sometimes," he told them, "the biggest impact you can make isn't through big actions, but in the way you treat others, even when they don't treat you the same." The conversation left everyone at the table reflecting on how small moments of kindness could ripple into something far greater. For Steph, it wasn't just about the people he had encountered that day. It was about the message his actions sent to anyone paying attention. The story of Steph's grace and generosity continued to resonate, proving that no matter how small, acts of kindness have the power to inspire change. Steph's legacy extended beyond basketball. It was about showing the world that humility, compassion, and respect could make a lasting difference. As the evening wound down, Steph smiled, knowing that his actions had sparked something bigger than a viral video. It was a reminder that true greatness isn't just measured by championships, but by the lives you touch along the way. What do you think about Steph Curry's actions in this story? Have you ever experienced or witnessed something similar? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.